Hello, and welcome to Zero to Something, a place where we talk about real founders' journeys, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Did you know that your startup exposes more than just your business model? It reveals your childhood. I know, that sounds dramatic, but hear me out. The way you respond to investor rejections, or the way you handle hiring, or the way you either avoid hard conversations or obsess over what people think of you. That's not just founder behavior. That's attachment behavior. Your leadership style didn't start with your startup. It started when you were 5. Now it shows up in board meetings and Slack messages and how you ask for help or don't ask for help at all. This episode is not therapy, but you might feel personally attacked sometimes. So let's talk about how your attachment style is running your startup in a lot of ways, and also how to lead with a bit more awareness. So let's start with the concept. It's been very popular lately, and I'm sure you've heard of it. So there are 4 main attachment styles. The first one, secure. That's the strive for, the golden standard. You trust others and you can delegate and you handle feedback really well. You lead with confidence and without needing control. The next one is anxious. You crave validation and attention. You micromanage, you overwork and take investor feedback like it's a personal attack. Next one is avoidant. This person hates vulnerability. They're overly independent, they don't ask for help, and they may ghost their team emotionally and even some of the messages in reality, physically. And the last one is disorganized. Basically, you swing between clingy and distant, avoidant and anxious. It's very unpredictable and is just a whirlwind of chaos. So let's talk a little bit about how these different attachment styles show up in just daily tasks for founders. And we will talk about 3, right? We'll talk about secure, avoidant, and anxious attachment, because the disorganized one, well, you just combine the anxious and avoidant and kind of swing between them in no particular order. And here you've got your disorganized one. So let's start with fundraising. Anxious founders tend to over-explain or pitch too soon because they fear of losing the opportunity. Avoidant founders, on the other hand, delay investor outreach or avoid follow-ups to avoid rejection. Secure founders treat rejections as feedback, not personal attacks, and they consider the stage they're in and whether they actually need the funding or not. When it comes to hiring and delegating tasks, anxious types usually operate under, I need to control everything or it will all fall apart. The avoidant ones usually operate under, I don't trust anybody to do the thing as well as I could do it. So I'll just do it myself. And then the secure ones usually think something along the lines of, let me hire smart, capable people and let them do their thing. When it comes to team communication, anxious types constantly check in. They write 1,000 different messages on Slack, and then they demand that everybody constantly writes everything too, and then reacts. And then they respond the second that you send that message to them because they just need to micromanage everything. And also, they really want to be liked. Avoidant types usually use minimal communication. They delay giving feedback, and they also themselves struggle with praise, both giving and receiving. And when it comes to secure attachment, then of course it's healthier ways to cope. It's direct and consistent communication. They're emotionally aware people who are open to giving feedback, and they want to build trust within their community. When it comes to conflict handling, anxious types avoid conflicts until they just explode. They feel deeply hurt by even the tiniest critiques. Avoidant types generally shut down, they disappear, they just never respond, and they intellectualize. That was a fun word. They intellectualize their emotions. Secure attachment people try to address the problems early on and with absolute clarity, empathy, and care. In decision-making, the differences between the types are also striking. Anxious types tend to overthink everything and kind of fall into this analysis paralysis situation. Avoidant types tend to act without alignment, like surprise pivots, hidden decisions, or just avoid the problem altogether. And then secure attachments, they ask for input and feedback, they weigh out their options, and then they move with conviction and full understanding. So now let's talk a little bit about real life application of this. And this section will be comprised out of two parts. The first one, I'll just give you very quickly my own example of what type of attachment I am and where it usually shows up. The second part, and that is the most subjective one, if you will, I will give examples of traits of these attachment styles taken from famous founders. And this, please take with a grain of salt. And also, if you want to argue about any of them and confront me, oh, please do so in the comments. I love a nice debate. So give me your opinions or maybe your own examples of such attachment styles, personas. I'd love to hear from you. So let's get on. My personal example. So I'm mostly secure, but I do have avoidant tendencies. For the most part, I'm comfortable leading and communicating, and that's probably mostly because of my psychological background. I don't micromanage, and I do trust people to do their work. But sometimes my avoidant part shows up. And where it mostly shows up is I delay following up with leads, even warm ones, because I don't want to be too much or annoy someone or be in somebody's face. I also ghost email offerings or partnerships of products that are not really interesting to us. I do it not because I'm rude, but because it just takes energy and time, and I choose to spend it elsewhere. Even replies like, thanks, not interested. I would have loved to get them myself when I send messages to people, but I don't really give them either. So I fully understand. I can appreciate the people who ignore me when I send them messages. Also, in my personal life, actually, I think in my startup life as well, whenever there is a conflict, I do need some space first because I need to distance myself. I need to pretend this is not happening. I need to go and clear my head. And only then can I return and have a constructive conversation with somebody. That's something I've been working on, not very successfully, I have to admit, but we are where we are. And now let's talk about those examples from other founders. I took very famous people, so everyone knows who I'm talking about. But then again, you're more than welcome to tell me your thoughts, agree, disagree, up to you. I would love to hear your opinion. And the first victim of today's psychological analysis is Elon Musk. I have to preface it by saying attachment styles can show up situationally, right? It doesn't have to be all the time in all the areas. And Elon Musk is situationally quite avoidant. He is known for abrupt decision making without notifying anybody about it, cutting off teams or ghosting entire massive projects like he did with the PR department in Tesla. Avoidance during stress time prefer control over vulnerability. And also he has admitted to intense independence and discomfort with slow decision making or bureaucracy, classic avoidant tendencies. Also, the key line for him and his avoidant behavior is when you don't trust others to follow through, you'd rather do it all yourself, even if it burns you out. Another example of avoidant behavior is Jeff Bezos during the early Amazon days. He was known for hyper-rationality and complete emotional detachment. Employees in early years of Amazon reported rare emotional validation or empathy, decision-making completely solo by Bezos, and little emotional consideration for others. He gave harsh feedback and executed high control over everything. Even when teams were failing, he would opt out of emotional support. Former Amazon execs described him as intensely result-oriented, focused, perfectionist, and emotionally aloof. Typical avoidant defense strategies. A good example of anxious attachment is Adam Neumann, the former CEO of WeWork. His desperate need for validation led to overpromising, overspending, and clinging to his vision long after it stopped serving the business. He tried to buy support of his employees with gifts and trips and alcohol parties. He also did some weird summer camps there. I don't know. Many questions. Anxious leaders like him often crave reassurance and struggle with feedback or perceived rejection. And investors initially loved him, but then this erratic leadership reflected deeper insecurity within him. Anxious leaders mistake hype for connection very often. And the more they chase being loved, the less grounded their decision-making becomes. The next one is disorganized attachment, and this person, an absolute headliner. Elizabeth Holmes, the head of Theranos. I don't know if you've heard about the company or not. If you haven't, do you live under a rock? And also, please go read about it. It's fascinating. But today we'll talk about her chaotic leadership style. So she presented intense charm and confidence in public, but internally made secretive and fear-based decisions. So she flipped between pushing people away and clinging to them too tightly. She micromanaged to a paranoid degree and isolated people at the same time. She created a culture of fear, but also a cult-like following at the same time. Her company was a perfect reflection of her inside turbulence. And the last one, the secure attachment. The best example, without even the slightest bit of hesitation to me, was Stuart Butterfield, the head of Slack. He's known for open communication, transparency with his failures, the background story of the origins of Slack, as well as emotional maturity. Secure leaders like him can give and receive feedback, delegate the tasks, and adapt without taking everything personally. Secure founders like him, they don't take business setbacks as personal rejections, and it shows in how they lead. So how do we spot which style we are presenting? Well, I did describe them to you, and a lot of people kind of recognize themselves already in these generic descriptions. But I will give you a couple phrases that you might be telling yourself that could be a potential reflection of your leadership style, of your attachment style. And again, as I said, attachment styles might show up situationally. They don't have to be always there all the time. But also it's important to note that they're kind of constant in a way that even if it happens once a year, like twice a week, it doesn't matter. But there is still some regularity to it. If it just happened to you once in your lifetime, you had that thought 10 years ago, probably don't worry about it. That's not your attachment style. Let's get into it then. If you delay following up with investors, leaders, or even warm intros, this might signal avoidant tendencies, distancing yourself to stay in control or avoid rejection. You feel personally crushed when someone says no to your idea. That could reflect anxious attachment because you're tying your self-worth too tightly to external approval. If you micromanage your team or overcheck your analytics, again, that's probably anxious style. You need constant reassurance that things aren't falling apart. If you ghost service providers, collaborators, or messages offering help, that's definitely an avoidance style. You might be feeling overwhelmed and needing to retreat to feel safe. If you say yes to things just to avoid confrontation or people disliking you, that's classic anxious trait. You're prioritizing connection over clarity or strategy. If you work best alone and resist delegation, even when you're drowning, that's a regular avoidant response to intimacy and trust. Control feels safer than vulnerability. At this point, you probably know which attachment style you have, both in your personal life and in your business. You can also make it much easier on yourself and go and take a test. Yes, it's rooted in the whole personal life and romantic connections and interpersonal connections. But the reality is those things are usually transferable from one area to another. Once you've identified which attachment style or styles you present throughout your business ventures, now it's important to understand what do we do with it? How do we lead with more awareness rather than just being tugged by our patterns? The first thing you need to do, and no, it's not reframing. You need to actually name the pattern, just out loud. Awareness weakens its grip. Try saying things like, on my example, I'm avoiding this investor email because I'm afraid of seeming too needy. Please don't self-diagnose. Just track behavior instead. Create a weekly log. Who did I avoid responding to? Who am I over-responding to? What am I scared of? Questions like this, specific to your attachment style, can help you dig deeper. Then pick one micro action that feels like resistance. Just go and do it. For example, reply to that email or send that update or tell somebody no. Next, create leadership grounding ritual. I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but hear me out on this one. So before you go for a pitch, let's say, or a conversation that you're dreading, do a 1-minute ritual that makes you feel more powerful or more calm or more secure. For anybody here who loves films and shows as much as I do, in Ted Lasso, and if you're not interested in that example, have you not watched it? Please go watch it. It's an awesome series. But anyways, in Ted Lasso, the head of the football team, she always felt uncomfortable being the only female in the boardroom of men. So before she went into the boardroom, she had this weird ritual where she went into the bathroom, stood in front of the mirror and made herself really big. She was like lifting her arms and doing scary faces. And it doesn't matter how silly it is. It's all about, well, does it help you? Does it make you feel good and powerful and secure? The reality is your startup will stretch you, but not just in pitch decks and product decisions, though there will be many of those, but it will also poke at the edges of who you've been and how you've learned to survive. The way you fundraise and lead or respond to conflict and hire people often echoes patterns formed long before you sign that incorporation document. That's not a flaw, that's information. When you notice the pattern, you have a shot at choosing something new. That's where real growth, both personal and startup growth, really starts. And as always, I'd like to leave you with 2 reflection prompts. Number 1, which situations trigger me most as a founder? And number 2, what part of my leadership feels like a pattern, not a choice? I would love to hear what attachment style you've identified in yourself and where it shows up. So please share that in the comments and like and subscribe, and I will see you again next episode.